All right, in this lecture, let's talk a little bit about demand and the idea of how customers use price to determine value and to determine whether or not to buy a product. Little important things to remember. Remember that price is used as an information tool for customers. If you set price low, customers assume that the quality of the product, whether it's a good, service, or an idea, is also low. All right. Again, so people use price as a surrogate for quality, especially if they don't have much information about the product. For example, you go into the store to buy a bottle of wine because you have your boss coming over for dinner. Well, how do so you don't know anything about wine, so how do you determine which is the best bottle of wine to buy? Of course, the answer is, well, I'm going to buy a bottle of wine that costs more because, in theory, products that cost more should be better. Price is also used as a decision factor in a purchase. Price is too high, I'm simply not going to be able to buy that product. So many of us would say, well, I'd love to have one of the Alienware computers like they have on, like the guys use on Big Bang Theory. My daughter happens to have an Alienware computer. But the problem is they cost $2,500. And for you, you say, well, they're better than maybe a $1,000 computer, but not much better. And the way I'm going to use it, I'm almost never going to be able to take advantage of the added features. And as a result, you say what? Well, I'm not going to spend $2,500 on a laptop computer that I might lose. And so price is used as a decision factor. And once again, we talked about the concept of a reference price. All right, so what does the impact of reference price have on pricing strategy? We already discussed this, but let's discuss it one more time. That is the idea that if I price my product too low, people think it's an inferior good. If I price my product too high, people think I'm overcharging for the product. So this is a little bit like the Goldilocks principle. I have to make sure that my price is in that range of reference prices that seem realistic and logical to people that I am targeting with my product. Next, we talk about the issue of elasticity, income elasticity, and cross elasticity. Okay, so and then we also want to talk about building a demand schedule. Well, let's talk a little bit about elasticity. Okay, the idea of price elasticity of demand is the percentage change in the quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. And there are three kinds of elasticity of demand. One is called elastic demand, okay? And this is when demand changes dramatically given a change in price. So even a small change in price results in a relatively high change in the quantity demanded. All right, this is called elastic demand, and the way to remember this, of course, is the idea that if demand is elastic, that means it stretches like an elastic band would stretch more for every price change. Inelastic demand is when demand doesn't change very much given a change in price. And this is usually for goods that are more required goods. All right, and so inelastic demand means the demand. Even though I change price, I either lower it or raise it. Demand doesn't change very much. And think about inelastic. Think about something that has no give or stretch to it. That we would call that inelastic. Okay, and so the idea of elastic demand is demand that stretches a lot when we make a small change in price. And inelastic demand means it doesn't change very much at all. There is also something called unit elasticity of demand, and this is when the demand changes at exactly the same rate as the price. That doesn't happen very often, but it's sort of it's the point at which we move from inelastic to elastic demand. There is one point in there that's called unit elasticity. Well, you remember you had this discussion in your microeconomics class. So why is this important? Here's why this is important to marketers. All right. So the key point here is that if demand is, and it's very important, so listen to this carefully. If demand is elastic and I want to increase revenues, if demand is elastic and I want to increase revenues, I lower the price. If demand is inelastic and I want to increase revenues, I raise price. Let's go through this one more time. If demand is elastic and I want to increase revenues, I lower price. Why is that? Well, because a small change in price results in what? A whole bunch more demand. So this might be true for a gas station that wants to increase demand for its gasoline. Maybe if they drop the price of their gas by 5%, they get a 10% increase in sales. Well, then what would happen is they would end up with more revenue. Inelastic demand is just the opposite case. So, for example, if you're a city, and you're running a bus service in your city, and revenues aren't keeping up with the cost of running the bus service, would you lower or raise price for that bus line to increase revenues? Well, the answer turns out you would raise price. And the reason that you would raise price is because the people who are riding the bus don't really have any alternatives. And so demand for bus service is relatively inelastic. That is, whether you lower price or raise price, it's not going to impact very much who rides the bus. All right. So this is why price elasticity demand is such an important point and is brought up in the book, because it impacts what you would do to increase revenues. A couple of other elasticities that you ought to be familiar with. One's called income elasticity. This is the impact of income on demand. So income elasticity is this idea of, does demand, if as incomes go up, does the demand for my product increase or decrease? If it increases, well, we want to know how much it increases. So for instance, when the per capita income goes up, the demand for automobiles goes up. Right? Because it's the idea that there's income elasticity for such things as new cars. All right. Now, there are certain goods that the demand for them goes down when incomes go up. An example of this might be hot dogs. How many, I only buy hot dogs when I can't afford to buy something better than hot dogs. So when I have more money, what happens to the demand for hot dogs for me? Well, it goes down. These instances are called inferior goods. That is a good where as I make more money, I buy less of that good. So incomes obviously affect pricing strategy, and that is why in many cases you will see companies targeting what is called an affluent buyer, or buyers that make more money. Cross elasticity demand is also an important aspect. This is the impact of competitors' prices on demand for your product. Cross elasticity demand refers to what happens to the demand for your good when the competitor raises or lowers their price. So here's an example. A cross elasticity demand for Pepsi when Coke raises or lowers prices. So if you go to the grocery store and Coca-Cola raises their prices and Pepsi's prices stay the same, what do you suppose happens to the demand for Pepsi? Well, if Coca-Cola raises their prices, the demand for Pepsi goes up because Coca-Cola now costs more, and people who ordinarily might buy Coca-Cola now switch over to Pepsi. Cross elasticity of demand. So what happens if you go to the grocery store the next time and now Coca-Cola's on sale? It's cheaper than Pepsi. Well, now all of a sudden, many of the people who were buying Pepsi will switch to Coca-Cola, and when the price of Coca-Cola goes down, so does the demand for Pepsi. That once again, cross elasticity of demand. The degree to which this happens is called a cross elasticity of demand. So the next time you go to the grocery store and the store brand Kroger soda is on sale, what happens to the demand for Pepsi? Well, in most cases, it doesn't change much. Why not? Well, it doesn't change much because customers don't perceive those as substitutes, and they're not willing to trade buying Pepsi for buying Kroger soda because they believe that Kroger soda is an inferior good. Understand then the cross elasticity demand has an impact on your marketing strategies, especially in terms of pricing. All right, so here's a sample demand schedule for coffee. All right, and so if you think about this, this probably makes sense. So I have a little coffee stand someplace. All right, I have a food truck, but all we do is sell coffee. It's great coffee. It's called Jack's Fog Lifter Coffee. It will certainly brighten you up and give you a little caffeine boost to get you off and running on the day. All right, so here's a sample demand schedule for coffee. If I sell coffee for 50 cents, I can sell 400 cups. If I raise the price to $1, I sell 325 cups. If I raise it to $1.50, I sell 200 cups, and at $2, I only sell 100 cups. All right, so this is a sample demand schedule. Now, how might I get this information? Well, I might go in and change my prices and find out what happens to demand at the various price points. Another option that I might have is I might go in and do some survey work, or I might go in and see what else is happening in terms of my competitors. Now, there are a number of things that affect this demand schedule, including competitors' prices and income elasticity and this whole idea of cross-elasticity of demand. But once again, the end goal in this idea of understanding demand is being able to estimate how many units I will sell at any given price. That's a crucial point for setting price.